What if everything you thought you knew about remote islands and climate history was completely wrong? Imagine stumbling upon evidence that flips our understanding of an entire ecosystem on its head. That's exactly what happened when researchers made a jaw-dropping discovery beneath the windswept Falkland Islands, a place so barren and treeless that finding ancient rainforest remains seems almost impossible. Today's Falkland Islands paint a picture of endless grasslands swept by relentless winds, where trees are practically non-existent. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Buried beneath the capital city of Stanley lies irrefutable proof that these same islands once harbored lush, moisture-rich forests teeming with life. The breakthrough came from what construction workers initially dismissed as ordinary debris. Little did they know, they had uncovered a lignitic layer, essentially a compressed time capsule of ancient plant life that had been perfectly preserved for millions of years. This wasn't just any random pile of old wooden leaves. It was a complete, fossilized forest floor, holding secrets that would revolutionize our understanding of these remote islands. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating and controversial. The discovery challenges everything we assume about how quickly ecosystems can transform and what role human activity versus natural climate cycles play in shaping our planet's landscapes. 3 types of evidence emerged from this remarkable find. Microscopic pollen grains that retain their distinctive shapes across geological time. Spores that survived millions of years, virtually unchanged. And chunks of fossilized wood so well preserved, they looked like they had just washed ashore yesterday. For beginners wondering how such tiny particles can survive so long, think of pollen grains as nature's indestructible time capsules. Their tough outer shells can withstand almost anything when buried in oxygen-poor, waterlogged conditions. The lignitic formation itself tells a compelling story. Picture ancient swamplands where fallen leaves, branches, and other plant matter accumulated faster than they could decompose. Over countless millennia, this organic soup compressed into dense, carbon-rich layers, essentially the early stages of coal formation. This process only occurs in very specific conditions, waterlogged environments with minimal oxygen, typically in shallow, protected basins near coastlines. When Dr. Zoe Thomas from the University of Southampton heard about the discovery, she raced to the construction site with her research team, knowing that exposure to air and sunlight would quickly destroy these precious samples. The tree remains were so pristinely preserved they looked like driftwood, she later recalled, emphasizing just how remarkable this preservation was. And this is the part most people miss: the painstaking detective work that follows such discoveries. Back in the laboratory, researchers carefully separated countless tiny grains from the surrounding sediment, examining each one under powerful microscopes. What they found was nothing short of extraordinary, a complete botanical census of an ancient ecosystem. The evidence revealed southern beech trees, scientifically known as nothofagus, and podocarps, which are southern hemisphere conifers, thriving alongside moisture-loving plants that typically grow in perpetually soggy ground. For those unfamiliar with these species, imagine the cool, misty forests you might find in parts of southern Chile or New Zealand today. That's the closest modern equivalent to what once flourished on the Falklands. The fossil pollen, spores, and wood paint a much different picture of the ancient environment, providing direct evidence of cool, wet forests. Explained Michael Donovan from Chicago's Field Museum, highlighting how dramatically different the ancient Falklands were from today's landscape. But here's where it gets controversial. How do we know this pollen actually came from local trees rather than being blown in from distant forests? This question strikes at the heart of paleontological methodology and has sparked debates in scientific circles. The answer lies in wood anatomy, the microscopic structure of tree cells, including their size, the tiny pits that allow water transport, and the rays that move nutrients horizontally. Think of it as nature's fingerprinting system. Each type of tree has distinctive cellular patterns that remain visible even after millions of years of fossilization. When researchers examined the wood fragments, they found cellular structures that perfectly matched the pollen types, confirming that both came from the same local forest community. This agreement between wood and pollen evidence is crucial because wind can transport pollen grains hundreds or even thousands of miles from their source. Without the wood confirmation, skeptics could argue that the pollen simply drifted in from distant South American forests. The matching evidence, however, proves these trees actually grew right there on the Falklands. Modern relatives of these ancient species still create similar ecosystems in southern Chile and Patagonia, forming cool, moss-covered forests that thrive in consistently moist conditions. Their presence in the Falklands fossil record provides compelling evidence for a completely different ancient climate. Dating these fossils presented its own set of challenges that highlight controversial aspects of paleontological research. Radiocarbon dating, the method most people are familiar with, only works reliably for materials up to about 50,000 years old. Beyond that time frame, which this discovery clearly exceeded, scientists must rely on more indirect methods that some critics argue are less precise. The research team used a technique called biostratigraphic correlation, essentially matching the Falklands pollen sequence with well-dated records from South America. When identical pollen types appear and disappear in the same chronological order across different sites, researchers can align their timelines. This method pointed to the mid to late Cenozoic era, tens of millions of years ago, during warmer periods when rainforests could extend to much higher latitudes and more remote islands than they can today. But here's what makes this discovery truly thought-provoking. It demonstrates how dramatically ecosystems can shift over geological time. Islands typically gain new species in waves, with seeds and spores traveling on wind currents, ocean debris, and migrating birds. During milder, wetter climate periods, the chances of successful colonization increase dramatically. Once pioneering tree species established themselves in sheltered, waterlogged basins on the ancient Falklands, they could create their own favorable microclimate. These early forests trapped moisture from passing clouds, reduced ground-level wind speeds, and gradually built stable communities that supported increasingly diverse plant and animal life. This pattern is well documented in island biology worldwide. Given sufficient time and appropriate environmental conditions, just a few successful colonizing species can transform into fully functioning forest ecosystems. The question that sparks heated debate among scientists is, how long does this process typically take? And what specific conditions are necessary? Eventually, climate patterns shifted dramatically. Cooling trends and glacial cycles brought colder, windier conditions to the South Atlantic. The Falklands lack high mountain ranges that could block strong westerly winds or capture additional rainfall from passing weather systems. Additionally, many of the island's soils are thin and peaty, making it difficult for trees to compete effectively with hardy grasses under current climatic conditions. This raises a controversial point that many people overlook. Ecosystems don't simply follow latitude lines as many assume. Local factors like prevailing winds, rainfall patterns, and topography often override broader climate patterns. Under today's environmental rules, open grasslands dominate most of the Falkland Islands because they're better adapted to the current harsh, windy conditions. Why should anyone care about ancient forests on remote islands? The implications extend far beyond academic curiosity. Fossil evidence like this provides climate scientists with real-world targets for testing their computer models. If a climate model recreating mid to late Cenozoic conditions successfully predicts cool-temperate rainforests on the Falklands, that's strong evidence the model is accurately capturing ancient climate patterns. If it fails to predict these forests, something important is missing from the model. These validation checks transform evidence from a single archaeological site into invaluable data for understanding global climate systems. But here's the controversial part that climate scientists debate. Should we be using ancient climate data to validate models that predict future climate change, or are the timescales and driving factors too different to make meaningful comparisons? There's also a broader, more philosophical lesson embedded in this discovery. Ecosystems can migrate, shrink, expand, or appear in locations that seem completely unsuitable by today's standards. The Falklands buried forest demonstrates how temperature, precipitation, and wind patterns can completely reorganize living communities over extended time periods. This challenges our assumptions about ecosystem stability and raises uncomfortable questions about how current environmental changes might reshape the biological world in ways we can't yet imagine. The research methodology itself followed rigorous scientific protocols. Fieldwork involved carefully documenting and sampling the lignitic layer while it remained in its original geological context. Laboratory analysis required isolating individual pollen grains and spores, then identifying them through detailed microscopic examination, a process that can take months for a single sample. Wood specimens underwent sectioning to reveal their diagnostic cellular features. Together, these multiple lines of evidence established both the ancient habitat characteristics and confirmed the local origin of the plant materials. For determining age, researchers systematically compared the Falklands pollen sequence with precisely dated South American profiles, tracking identical marker species as they appeared and disappeared over time. This approach allowed scientists to assign the fossils to a specific geological timeframe without depending on potentially unreliable radiocarbon dating for such ancient materials. So what does this remarkable discovery ultimately tell us? Hidden beneath Stanley, the Falkland Islands capital, lies compelling evidence of cool, wet forests dominated by southern beech and podocarp relatives, thriving in sheltered, waterlogged basins during the mid to late Cenozoic era. These forests existed during warmer global intervals that allowed tree species to colonize much higher latitudes and more remote islands than they can reach today. This crystal-clear snapshot of ancient life, preserved in pollen, spores, and fossilized wood, adds crucial data to our understanding of Earth's climate history. More importantly, it provides scientists with essential tools for testing and improving the models we use to understand past environmental changes and predict future ones. But here's what I find most controversial about this entire discovery. If climate change could transform the Falklands from lush rainforest to barren grassland over millions of years through natural processes, what does that tell us about the pace and scale of current environmental changes? Are we witnessing normal geological processes accelerated, or something completely unprecedented in Earth's history? The complete research findings were published in the prestigious journal Antarctic Science, adding to the growing body of evidence that our planet's ecosystems are far more dynamic and changeable than most people realize. What do you think? Does this discovery change how you view the relationship between climate and ecosystems? Should we be more concerned about rapid environmental changes? Or does this evidence suggest that dramatic ecosystem shifts are simply part of Earth's natural rhythm? I'd love to hear your perspective on whether findings like this make you more or less worried about current climate trends. Share your thoughts, and let's get a real discussion going about what this means for our understanding of environmental change.